Welcome to Voices from Below, a podcast where we share the real stories and experiences of miners. Our aim is to foster understanding and positive change by highlighting personal experiences and insights without focusing on specific individuals or organizations. The views shared here are personal and not necessarily those of the podcast team. Thanks for joining us. Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Voices from Below. Today, we're talking with Ian, a mining engineer with over 15 years on the job. Ian, thanks for joining us today, man.
Thank you so much, Aidan, for joining The Voice, and for everyone that is listening. Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks.
Listening.
Yeah, thanks, man. So could you start a little bit by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your journey so far in mining?
Yeah, okay. My name is Ian Chauke. I think it is quite easy to pronounce Chauke. Born in South Africa. So born and bred in South Africa, grew up in mining town, or perhaps next to a mining town. And I think when I grew up, I had a little assignment in my high school years, right? So in my high school years, I had to do an assignment. So I wanted to do an assignment about typically what the labor sending countries, because we've got other foreign countries that are surrounding South Africa, like your countries like the Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Zambia, that were sending a lot of their people to South African mining industry when it was still a boom, and there was a whole lot of them sent down to South Africa to start working in the South African mining industry. So I wanted to sort of study, do a research for school in terms of what is the impact and the economic benefits of having sending countries into South Africa in particular. And unbeknown to me, I bumped into a security guard in a particular mine that I visited at that time for just a school assignment. And the security guard sort of thought of me, so, oh, wow, man, this is brilliant. You're a young man, you want to be mining, you're going to be a mining manager one day. Then he took me through around the car park and said, look, this is the car that you're going to drive if you sort of cut it through in your mining career, right? And I didn't even know anything about mining. I didn't even know there was such thing as mining engineering. I think I grew up in a time where my parents used to tell us that if you don't want to study and work hard, you're going to end up in the mine and just be general labor. So, of course, I mean, we went to university not to be general labor, of course, right? Fast forward to that, I think my parents were not that rich. We couldn't afford university. So I had to do some work during school. When I'm off school, I will sort of do side gigs to raise up money for my registration for university. Fast forward, managed to raise the funds and then registered in the University of Johannesburg. At least I can mention the university, right? Saying something. So I registered to the university and only had registration money. So I studied all throughout the university without paying fees, right? Because you only need to complete your fees towards the end of the year. So towards the end of the year, I didn't have money to pay for fees. Like, wow, I was like, now reality comes that, you know what, dude, you've managed to study for a year, you can get your results, you can continue to second year, right? Lucky me, one guy told me, no, look, there's a government institution that is looking to sponsor mining engineers. Just go to the office. They gave me the office block and the address of the office block. So I didn't even have money there to catch a cab. So I had to walk about 5 kilometers to this place. Got there, took a 5-kilometer walk, got there, and I said, guys, you know what? I heard you guys are looking for graduate. You want to find a graduate? I said, yeah, we are. I said, where are your results? I'm like, oh, dude, I don't have school results. So I said, no, but how can we help you? You don't have school results. We don't know if you are passing, you do good or you do bad. So I went to school and went literally begged and knelt on my knees and said to the HOD that, you know what, if you can just show me anything, or if you can just email the results to the particular institution, right, and just write my name in there. That's all they want. I don't need to see the results. You can tell me if I pass. Just send the guys the results, right? And after a 2-hour debate with the HOD, he decided to say, you know what, I'm going to do it, but this is the last time I ever do something like that, right? And yeah, they sent the result through and the guys were happy. Before I know it, they sent me a call and said, look, we're going to reimburse you for all your school fees money starting from first year and pay for your second year. I was like, great. That's just basically how my story started. I don't know why I got into it, but other than that, somebody who was a security guard sort of spoke it into my life. Fast forward, here I am, graduated in the university, started in the mines, got my government ticket, typically you start with a license certificate and you get your mine officer certificate and mine manager certificate. Did that so well with flying colors, and I got all my government tickets in a short space of time. Under 2 years, I'd already achieved my mine manager certificate. And from there, it became hard work. One thing that I'm quite good at, I'm very good in storytelling. I'm an African, so Africans are good at storytelling. So I use storytelling to motivate my team, and they performed. And through that performance, and I saw myself growing through the ranks so much quicker because I performed numbers that were crazy. And to me, it was just, I enjoyed it because I was just performing. I just enjoyed numbers, and the numbers were numbering, betting out, right? And yeah, and then from there, sort of then grew into these roles. And then now, obviously, fast forward, I'm now a manager in a mine.
And yeah, so you mentioned the place that you grew up. Was mining a pretty common path? Was that what a lot of kids there did when they grew up, or was that not as common?
Look, so I grew up in Johannesburg. So Johannesburg is, well, you've seen it in social media. Johannesburg is a city, is a mega city, right? And within the Johannesburg region is divided into the north, the south, the west, and the east. So I stayed in the western side of Johannesburg. So driving from home to Johannesburg, because school I went to Johannesburg was about a 40 minutes drive to Johannesburg. So that being the city, so mining was not popular for within my age group. It was more, the careers that were popular at that time was more marketing, law firms. I think before I even started mining, I wanted to be a lawyer. So I think I remember at the time I wanted to be part of the biggest South African law firms, commercial law firms. And that is what my passion was at. So yeah, most of my friends obviously studied your typical medicine, and they studied marketing, and they studied electrical engineering, also because they wanted to join one of the biggest power distributors of electrical generators in South Africa. So I went into mining. Fast forward, I am enjoying it with all the challenges it comes with, but I think it's it is worth it. I mean, hard as it is, but I think it has made me a better person. It has refined me. The challenges, and obviously on my leadership skills as a person and personal in my personal capacity, because then I've learned a lot of things about my own weakness as a person in leadership, and yeah, and also the sort of the hard decision that I needed to make. I've learned from moving from being indecisive to more decisive as a person. I don't second guess myself. I think I've gained confidence in terms of knowing when to say yes and no. And, yeah, and previously it was quite difficult to say no, but now I say it much easier with a smile and diplomatically. So
Yeah. Yeah. So you already, talked a little bit about, you growing up and how you got into mining. So could you maybe go into a little bit more detail about what you've done so far in your in your career in mining for the last, I think it was 15 years, right?
yeah, the last 15 years, look, I mean, I started off in the coal mining industry back in the days, and in the coal mining industry, yeah, I thought, you know what, the South African coal mining industry is the most easiest mining industry to work at. It's like cutting cheese, right? And I realized that, you know what, if I want to be the best in the world, or the best in South Africa, and Africa for that matter in particular, I need to go to the gold mine. So I then went to join the biggest producer of gold in South Africa and globally. And I joined them. I said, you know what, if you want to be the best in the world, you need to join the best in the world and make a name for yourself. So I think that is where I started off, because I realized that, you know what, there are no rewards in doing easy things in life, right? So you need to do the hardest thing. Yes, though the gold mines in South Africa are quite bad from a fatal point of view, injury point of view, and some of the things that happen there. Though the safety is good, is outstanding. I mean, the system that they have is so amazing, but there's obviously things that you cannot, with all the safety measures that you put in place. I mean, the geological issues that beyond human control.
Yeah.
I went through that to survive a couple of fall of grounds, survive a couple of major events, right? But however, I survived, but I didn't change my mind. I was never traumatized. I mean, I had seen people dying right in front of my eyes, and I've seen FOG right in front of my eyes. Survived it myself, right? But it never scared me. It actually made me more stronger. That why should I be dead? Because with all the knowledge that I have from varsity, it's important that as growing up as a mining engineer. So how do we make decisions that can make us navigate through these challenges? Was it easy? It was not easy. Some of the experience of first-time experiences. And I think when I started off as a junior mining engineer, there has been a lot of challenges because you are a young person trying to break through to an industry that is so entrenched in terms of either the older generation and also, racial issues in South Africa still prevalent at that time. So you needed to prove yourself 100 times as you need to put in almost 120%, 200% matter to be felt so that your presence can be felt, right? And I had to do that. And I think fast forward, though I hated how it all started in the beginning, but as I grow older at this point, I've seen how much of that journey sort of impacted me because some of the experience that I went through. Right now, at this position, I'm able to manage them much easier. It's like a walk in the park. I mean, guys go through challenges at work currently. And when I need to solve those problems, people always ask me, how is it that you're so always relaxed? I'm like, yo, if you only know what the price that I had to pay in the earlier days to be where I am, it only looks easier now because you're not seeing the process that I had to go through to be I think what a well refined money engineer. I think yes, I think those are do I have a problem with those experiences? No, no. If I have to do it again, I'll do it through the same experience because I think they've contributed so much in as the positive one and the negative one as well in terms of refining my character as a person and also my experience as a person in the industry as a whole. Open up my eyes to have a better understanding uh, the lower level challenges, the junior level challenges, and the senior level challenges, and obviously over and above the global.
Very interesting. So you said that you'd witnessed some fatalities even in front of you. So from what you've heard of, from what you've seen, and obviously you don't have to go into too much detail, but from what you've seen, are those when people get hurt or even killed, is that typically their fault or is that just something else? Is it just by coincidence normally that it's not necessarily like on them specifically?
No, no, look, to tell you the honest truth, I think in the gold mines back then at the time when I was there, the biggest challenge is that seismicity is something that you will not ever get to control. I work for the deepest gold mine in the world, not just in within South Africa, but in the world, right? I mean, the level of and the distances that you walk to get to work and the time zones that you need to wake up 4 a.m. in the morning and be at work. So you can imagine how tedious the environment and the setup is. For a young man like you don't want to put yourself in such environment. But I was there. I paid the price. So I think most of the incident in my watch that I saw happen were predominantly seismicity, fall of guns, something beyond anybody's control. We've any company have done it. We were under my watch. We've done all the support system that we needed to put in place. We understood the geotechnical challenges in place, and we've almost complied in terms of ensuring compliance and all those things. But yeah, when nature calls, there's nothing that you can do. In terms of incidents, which is also bad for my mining kid, I've never really had a lot of incident myself, but in the incidents that I have myself personally was very, very small, is that they were predominantly done not because of failure in management control on the system itself, but it was more on either, I would ask them, perhaps it's fatigue that actually affects the judgment of most people, that people sort of make shortcuts because you're fatigued, you want to knock off, you're tired, right? But your life depends on you doing it. Whether you hate it or you don't hate it, you just have to do it. So sometimes I see a lot of misjudgment in terms of decision making where we don't we don't apply the word safe production mindset. It's actually production and safety. So a lot of people separate the two KPIs. We're like safety is safety and production is production. And that's the challenge. We don't look at production from a point that it's a triumvirate right of a number of things, which is one thing safety, one it is production as a driver, and then also myself, right? So I think that experience has taught me that sometimes some of the challenges we have in the mining industry are about the culture of leadership. So if I, as a leader or as a supervisor, overlook what I don't inspect is what I expect, right? So if I inspect things and teach a culture that say, I will not tolerate safe work practice, And I take action when I see people that operate completely different, and also make sure that the guys take breaks in between so that they can rest, right? If I don't do that, if I don't sort of teach that kind of culture, then it becomes quite difficult. So I got so lucky, and perhaps myself, not some of my peers, it's because I've initiated a culture of safety. It's important that, you know what, when you go underground in the mines, you must keep in mind that there's a family that is waiting for us after a day's work. I asked my employees back then to come with the pictures of that family, to put them in the waiting place underground, so that whatever it is that they do, those pictures must always remind them that we might not come back after a day's work. But
Yeah.
if it is within our control, let's at least control what is within our means, and what is not. We just have to trust God and pray every day. He grants us some means and longevity, right? But I think that the inspiration, like I said, as a storyteller, I think around people coming to bring photos of their family to work. It's, to me, the starting point to have those in the waiting place. And yeah, I think then people started working more safer. But yeah, that's the reality of the industry. But fast forward, I left the government industry. PGX.
Yeah. So you said, that it's generally not as common on the mind, that it's generally either totally random, that just something happens that's kind of outside of people's controls, or they want to do shortcuts or anything like that. But when it comes specifically to the training for these roles, from what you've seen in your career, do you think that they're properly trained to be able to go down in some of these largest mines in the entire world, you were saying, or do you think that the training is a little bit lacking in that regard?
No, I think from a training point of view, I think training in South Africa in particular, that's my opinion, and I think I can justify my position in terms of opinion, is that so the industry in itself started off with different kinds of dialect of languages. I mean, you are in South Africa, there's 11 official languages, so it's a different dialect of languages. So the white speaking South African speak two languages. It's either Afrikaans, which is a dialect of Dutch, which is your typical Netherlands, and then also English, which is obviously we using the UK English, right? So now that being said, is that now a lot of the leadership, when you look at the South African mining industry, where it came from, so the leadership was predominantly white people. So a lot of general labor did not know how to speak English because they didn't go to school, right? So now, fast forward, a bastardized language was born, similar to some languages of formed from Latin. So we came in with what Fanagalo. So it's a language that we speak in. It's called Fanagalo. So it's a very instructive language, right? So in Fanagalo, we don't say, okay, guys, go underground, you're going to drill here and blast. Eh? So in Fanagalo, you say it completely different. It says you're gonna do this. It's very instructive. It doesn't sort of, it's not an engaging, it's instruction. Sure. And because of that, because it's an instruction language, it always assumes that the person that is listening does not understand. So there is no room for engagement, right? And I think a lot of the training is more based on the rules. It's a rule based. It's not teaching people to understand why things need to work in a particular way. Right? If you tell a person that you need to support underground to hold the hanging wall, but you also don't make them understand that the quality of the support is equally important. Because why? Just a small deviation in support can actually lead to other issues, other things going wrong. But you go underground every day, and you still see people that sort of damage safety equipment. Like, I mean, I've asked guys underground the other time, and went underground, I stopped them working. They went underground. They didn't check the refuge bay, so I went to the refuge bay, checked the refuge, and I realized that it's not life sustaining. Then I went underground and said, "But guys, why are you working when your refuge bay is not life sustaining? So if a fire has to happen and you need to go to a refuge bay, you will all die in the refuge bay because it won't be able to sustain life, because all the nitty gritties that needs to be taken were never taken." So and now fast forward, with that being said, the South African mining industry started paying people for safety. I don't think you should pay me to work safe, right? I mean, started paying safety safe bonus, right? To disencourage shortcuts, but what it actually did is that people thought they now need to be incentivized to work safe. I mean, you're trying to protect your life, you want to be incentivized to protect your own life. I mean, that's the whole South African culture in terms of safety, which I completely don't agree with, that we should pay people bonuses for 1 million fatality free shift. No, I mean, I want to be alive, right? So should I be incentivized for that? And I think that is completely wrong. Because sometimes what tends to happen, injuries do happen and they get hidden simple because people get penalized for safety, poor performances. And it has become such a witch hunt, even to a managerial level, that these things become witch hunt. You literally can lose your job on safety performances, and even if some of these things are not within your control. And yeah, that's the reality that we live in. And I think that it becomes such a legal battle that if you don't understand the legalities and regulation, you might find yourself sitting on the other side of the fence. And yeah, I think that's what makes it tough. And people try, and then obviously the politics of the day, politics are everywhere in the industry, even office politics. Sometimes people then justify why they should change certain positions because of other people's performance. And that is the answer so important that you need to almost walk on eggshells when it comes to and at the same time you need to produce and perform. So it's quite challenging to balance it too, especially that we no longer complying because that's what we need to do, but it's almost like a tick box exercise and say, yeah, look, I mean, if things goes wrong, I need to prove myself that I was at fault. And yeah, I think that's a challenge all across South African mining industry in particular. Because I've worked for a couple of mining houses, and it's been the same culture. But we understand is that the regulation is not so nice.
Yeah, and then specifically, I know, like in some countries in Africa, like the Democratic Republic of Congo, there seems to be a good amount of illegal mines, or not fully legal ones. Do you see that at all in South Africa, or is it all pretty regulated for the most part, from what you've seen?
Look, I think South Africa in particular, I mean, in the world, in the world in particular, I mean, if you look at the South African standards and regulation in terms of safety, I mean, the whole Australia in particular regulation is a copy and paste of South African laws. So I think South Africa, in terms of policy making and in terms of regulation making, I think we are the best in the world. I think the only thing that the European countries have done is that they've went an extra mile in terms of the limitations. For instance, if the noise level is 85 decibel in South Africa, in Australia is 65. But the law, word on word, is a copy and paste of South African laws. I think we are good as a country in terms of policy making, but we're not so good in policy implementation, right? And I think that also, given our history, where we're coming from, is that the how South Africa grew out of apartheid to a more democratic country is completely different to other African countries that have gained their independence way, way, way much earlier, and some of the infrastructure development and policy making were not in place, right? So that is the reason why, if you look at South African mining is a lead in Africa as a whole, in mining in particular, and compared to any other African countries, by far the leader. And because of that, we've gone so mature. We've matured in terms of policies in the industries in particular compared to the other countries. Now, that is one. Secondly, because we have a law, which is the MPRD, the Mineral Petroleum Development Act, which says that you can own the land, but the mineral belongs to the government, right? Is that in that way, nobody can abuse process of minerals without having a permit. So now, if you take the DRC and some other African countries, that your typical gold mines and all these minerals are outcrops. They're closer to surface. Now, right? So the community is able to access them with just free digging without very extensive technology or machinery. And that is the reason why it's a bit informal. It is not wrong, because if you're saying it is wrong, based on what? But it is formal. Unless if you compare apples with apples. If I compare South African mining versus Australia, then it's about machinery standard in place and the right machine for the right person. If you look at informal mining in South Africa, there is informal mining in South Africa, which is illegal, most of it, which you call them zama-zamas. The word zama-zama means triers, chance takers,
Okay.
right? So yeah, there is that, but it's very minimal. There's also, yes, you get arrested if you're caught up in that, because why? Minerals are not, there's processes of minerals. So whereas in some countries there isn't much rules around minerals, right? Why? I don't know. And I think perhaps, like in everywhere, I think leadership for something that has gone down. I think the last time we have statesmen in the world, we get the likes of Nelson Mandela, and you look at the likes of Winston Churchill. I mean, those were statesmen. Fast forward now, different leadership without mentioning anybody, but I think leadership in general, globally, has declined, that we don't have leaders. And I think most of African countries are still, I don't know, I think there's a whole lot of corruption in particular, and a lot of state capturing that is taking place. So no one wants to make a decision. And I think that is where the challenge is. And I think if they had to make a decision, I think they would have taken the Chinese approach, where the Chinese, you've seen how China did what it did to rebuild itself to where it is as a dominant, a global competitor to the US and the other countries globally. It's because they've taken a lot of Chinese young people all across the world to study systems and brought them back in China and give them funding to sort of enable some of the learning. And I think Botswana did so well in that, in particular, where they've sent some Botswana resident all over the world to learn and come back and sort of they're getting there. So obviously it doesn't happen overnight. We've not done that in South Africa. And I think, however, we were so lucky enough that the best of the world came to South Africa. I mean, the mining industry started in South Africa, the biggest suppliers and machineries in South Africa, right? So because of that, we quite lucky, unlike other African countries. And I think because of also our democracy and policies, and so political positions and laws has also allowed trade to be fair in other countries.
So yeah, you mentioned some potential racial issues in the industry in general, but do you notice anything within the mines itself? Are there any dynamics down there or anything, or is that generally not that present in the mines specifically?
No, look, I mean, South Africa in particular, when it comes to racial issues, is the laws are very strict. It is a criminal offense to be racial, so we're very clear about that. But obviously, I mean, racial issues have been there in the country for years, and because they've been there for years, they've matured, right? So most of the racial things that happen are not direct racism. They're very structural. They're very subtle, extremely subtle. Right? It takes somebody that can read between the lines that there are still those racial boundaries, and I think some of them might not necessarily be a racial boundary issue, but it's because of if you look at many years ago in South Africa, before things changed, you had a situation whereby there was a Work Preservation Act, right? So fast forward, obviously, to now realign or sort of fix the past, we needed to create laws like the BE, Black Economic Empowerment, laws that says that, you know what, if you're a company, you don't have a representation of the people in the country, you will not trade, because then you are being unfair to the people of the land, right? For instance, if I come into the US, like Elon Musk is there in the US, it was in California. So he needs to understand that he needs to hire people within California. He can't bring South Africans there simple because it's from South Africa. No, it's not like that. So that is just basically the requirement. But it shouldn't be on a labor level. It also needs to be on an executive level. Right? So that does happen. But then again, you still also see that there's some subtle work preservation that happens that are not as obvious, but if you read between the line, you should pick them up. You find some companies will appoint a CEO that is from a particular country. Fast forward, if it needs to be a black person, then they put two CEOs. I mean, where in the world, must it be two CEOs? And we've seen such practices in companies, and they will justify it. And then you find that salary issues where certain people will be in a junior level because of work preservation. They will earn more money than what you would earn. And then when you question it, they say, but experience, but you say, oh, but I got a degree in mining. And this person doesn't have a degree. Why is he still earning a lot? Because then the playing field must be leveled. Yeah, we still find that. But I think a lot of listed companies are quite careful in terms of making sure that those things are managed. But I think to give the benefit of the doubt in the industry is that I think maybe there's a 90% compliance, and we can still do better to get to 100%. I don't think we will get there, right? I mean, we are an amazing nation as a country. We are united as a country. Of course, is that it's not everybody that changes over.
Yeah, and specifically, what do you think that people tend to get wrong about the mining industry, and more specifically the South African mining industry for the most part?
I think personally, like I said myself, like from what I've read and what I understand in the country in particular, is that obviously I've read this thing well and understand the subjects because I didn't want to be just a participant to what is happening in the mining industry. It is an industry that I'm at. I need to understand it, even outside of the operation side of it. Is that the mining industry has not exchanged hands. If you study the mining industry, the owners, still the owners, it exchange hands in a very small group of people, right? And because of that, right, now the government now puts more laws to impose terms and conditions, and that's what the problem that typically creates a problem, because the boys club of the South African mining industry probably not so happy that all the government is imposing. And we do know that over and above that, there is sort of brown envelopes that runs in terms of capturing government or the state in terms of some of the decision making in some of the chip companies, right? But the bottom line is that it doesn't exchange a lot of hands, and the more it remains like that, the more government puts in a lot of rules and laws to say, yeah, but why are we not beneficiating our own minerals? We're taking minerals out of the country, they come back in South Africa at 100 times the price. But we made them, we mined them. Why are we paying 100 times the amount of money? That is it's a policy issue. And the more that people fight to say, but no, we're not being protected from policy issues, because in any other country, if I have to mine oil anywhere in Europe, I would then have to stick to the bilateral rules that governs those particular states, right? But it looks like when it comes to any other African country, we want to be very lenient in terms of the very same rules. I think perhaps that's the reason you find a lot of resistance, right? And then also the incident in the mining industry at one particular point in time, they were not ending up until government said, you know what, saying no, if people die in the mine, we're going to start taking CEOs into task. Right now, it now forces the CEO to do visible field leadership in the operation, not sit in corporate and just mind the business. They need to visit the operation and see for themselves that the conditions that people are looking at, the conditions are they in line with best practices of the world. And I think that particular South Africa has become so strict in terms of that. And obviously, it is not going to sit with some boys clubs. That's some of the big money makers and the investors. But I think if you look at it in a different perspective, it actually makes sense. But then I guess it's a debate for another day, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and specifically for someone who was, in your position, right, who's in South Africa and who suddenly gets, someone interested in the mining industry, what advice would you give to them if they were saying, "Hey, I'm interested in this. I want to get involved"? What exactly would you say to them?
Look, I do that quite a lot, and it's just I do encourage and I do motivate young people. I do a lot of talks in universities and encouraging young people to go into mining. Even my social media space is basically littered with encouragement to come into the South African industry, right? And why is it? Why is that? Why am I doing it? I mean, almost everything that is from manufacturing to art is mined. Everything that we ever do is mining. Even agriculture in itself is basically, I would call it renewable mining, because you can plant a tree and then you eat the fruits and still replant it again. So that's a renewable mining. That's mining, you take out the gold, you can't reproduce it again, right? But you're taking from the ground, from the earth. So for me personally, I think some of the solution to any challenges in the world will come from the periodic table. Some of the things in the periodic table, we need to mine them and convert them to final products. So we do need that. We do need that for the economy and the betterment of our country. I mean, for instance, we need to mine cement. You need to crush some stone to get cement. You need to crush mica to make paint. You need to mine steel to manufacture cars. You need to, if you want a diamond ring, someone must go there and mine it. If you want gold, that. So that needs to be mined. For us to construct cars, we need to take from the earth, right? I guess for that particular purpose, I mean, Africa in itself, in particular, is behind in terms of revolution, right? I mean, you got now the for ER, the Industrial Revolution, the IT revolution that is happening all over the world globally. And some of us are still sitting in infrastructure development in Africa. So you see, now that's the problem. We need to catch up with the infrastructure development before we start speaking about the Internet of Things. Do we have the infrastructure to be able to host the future generation? So we're quite behind. So we need a lot of mining engineers in the industry, whether all across Africa, in order that we can catch up with the infrastructure development and get a lot of the community out of poverty, right? And once we've done that, then we can talk about AI. When you still suffer the military infrastructure, what will AI do for you? You don't have to have a hospital. Doesn't matter how you optimize doctors, you don't have a hospital. Sort out that infrastructure. And I think mining is a solution to infrastructure development all across the country, in Africa in particular.
Well, thank you so much, Ian, for sharing all of this. I really appreciate you for coming out, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for interviewing me. And also, I'm looking forward that one of the good days you'll bring the podcast to South Africa. I'll be really interested to host you in South Africa, and looking forward to visit you in the other side of the world. And you can take me through how you do things. And that's my commitment to. Let's bring the voice to Africa. Like, it shouldn't be digital. We should do it live here. The Mining Indaba is coming up next year, so perhaps that should be an opportunity for us to meet there and do something in Cape Town. I'll take care of you. Don't worry about accommodation. It's on me.
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's do it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ian. And yeah, well, I'll talk to you later, man. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you so much. Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to Voices from Below. If you or anyone you know wants to be featured on Voices from Below, you can reach us at voicesfrombelowpodcast@gmail.com. That is voicesfrombelowpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to catch you in the next episode.